The story opens with Earth plunged into chaos as mysterious gates appear worldwide, releasing waves of terrifying monsters. Humanity, unprepared for such an invasion, is quickly overwhelmed. Cities fall, and society crumbles as people struggle to survive against these relentless threats. Just when it seems all hope is lost, powerful beings from three different realms arrive: the martial world of Un, the magical kingdom of Einhart, and the demonic realm of Gehenna. These superhumans decimate the monsters with ease, showcasing abilities far beyond human comprehension. However, these beings are not benevolent saviors. Instead of rescuing humanity, they impose their dominance under the harsh law of survival of the fittest. Earth is transformed into a battleground where the newly awakened players, humans granted unique abilities by the gates, are forced to fight not only monsters but also the oppressive rule of the superhumans. Amid this turmoil, we meet Lee Ro-woon, an ordinary young man with extraordinary resolve. Lee Ro-woon, despite lacking overwhelming power, seeks to bridge the gap between Earth's struggling players and the arrogant superhumans. His dream is to create harmony and restore balance to the fractured world. But his ideals are met with disdain. The superhumans view him as a mere insect, a nuisance to their absolute authority. Worse, his own comrades betray him, driven by fear, jealousy, and the desire to survive in this ruthless new world order. Stripped of everything he held dear, his strength, his friends, and his purpose, Lee Ro-woon faces utter despair. Left to die in the ruins of a once thriving city, he contemplates surrendering to his fate. But just as he reaches his breaking point, a mysterious, chaotic energy engulfs him. Lee Ro-woon is chosen as the vessel of chaos, a force beyond mortal understanding, and is transported to a sealed world hidden beyond the fabric of reality. In this enigmatic realm, he awakens in complete darkness, disoriented and battered. The void is cold and endless, filled with whispers of forgotten souls and echoes of ancient power. As he stumbles forward, three towering figures emerge from the shadows, each exuding an overwhelming aura. They are the three kings, ancient entities who rule over martial arts, magic, and demonic power. The martial king, clad in crimson armor with piercing eyes like burning embers, tests Lee Ro-woon's will by subjecting him to brutal physical trials. The magic king, robed in ethereal garments glowing with runes, challenges his mind with illusions and riddles, probing the depth of his spirit. The demonic king, wreathed in dark flames, tempts him with offers of boundless power in exchange for his humanity. Despite the pain, fear, and despair, Lee Ro-woon refuses to break. His heart, scarred by betrayal, yet fueled by an unyielding desire to change the world, burns brighter with every challenge. Recognizing his indomitable spirit, the three kings deem him worthy. They offer him not just power, but the knowledge and mastery to shape his destiny. Chapter 2 picks up with Lee Ro-woon standing before the three kings, his heart still burning with determination. The ancient beings acknowledge his potential but warn him that their teachings will push him beyond his limits. They make it clear, this is not a gift but a trial. To wield true power, he must endure unimaginable pain, both physical and mental. The first phase of his training begins under the martial king. Ro-woon is thrown into a brutal environment, a wasteland where gravity is so intense that even standing feels like carrying mountains on his back. His body screams in agony with every step, but he pushes forward, driven by memories of betrayal and the desire to never be powerless again. Days blur into weeks as he learns to control his breath, refine his movements, and build strength beyond human limits. Despite countless failures, Ro-woon never quits, his spirit unbreakable. He learns various martial techniques, including pressure point strikes, unarmed combat, and mastery over his physical form. The martial king subjects him to near-death experiences, forcing him to adapt and overcome, shaping his body into a weapon. Next, the Magic King takes over. Ro-woon is plunged into a realm of illusions where reality constantly shifts. Here, he faces his deepest fears, the faces of his betrayers, the moments of his downfall, and the overwhelming guilt of his past. But the Magic King's lessons aren't just about overcoming fear, they are about understanding it. Rowoon learns to manipulate the very fabric of mana, bending reality to his will. He discovers that magic isn't just about power. It's about perception, focus, and clarity of mind. He studies ancient runes, chants incantations, and learns to summon elemental forces. Through rigorous mental discipline, Rowoon expands his consciousness, unlocking latent abilities that allow him to control both offensive and defensive magic with precision. Finally, Rowoon meets the Demonic King, whose training is the most harrowing. The Demonic King doesn't teach through guidance, but through torment. Rowoon is forced to confront the darkness within himself: rage, hatred, vengeance. Instead of suppressing these emotions, he learns to harness them, transforming his inner chaos into a wellspring of strength. This training awakens a part of Rowoon he never knew existed, a ruthless side that balances his innate sense of justice. The Demonic King pushes him into battles against nightmarish creatures born from his subconscious fears, forcing him to embrace his darker instincts. Through these trials, Rowoon gains mastery over demonic energy, learning to channel it without losing himself to its corruption. As months pass in this sealed realm, Rowoon undergoes a profound transformation. His once frail body becomes a vessel of overwhelming power, his mind sharp as a blade, and his heart tempered like steel. He is no longer the boy who was betrayed. He is a warrior forged by the harshest masters in existence. After enduring countless trials, Rowoon faces a final test where he must confront the combined might of the three kings. In a battle that pushes him beyond his limits, he showcases everything he has learned: his martial prowess, magical command, and mastery over demonic energy. Though battered and bloodied, he refuses to yield. His resilience and strategic brilliance impress even the three kings. Chapter 2 concludes with Rowoon standing at the edge of the sealed world, the three kings watching silently. Their final words echo in his mind: "You are ready, but the world is not ready for you." With newfound strength and purpose, Rowoon prepares to return to the world that once abandoned him, not as a victim, but as a force that will reshape its destiny. His eyes, once filled with doubt, now burn with the promise of vengeance and the determination to forge his own path. Chapter 3 begins with Rowoon stepping back into the world he had once known, only to find it altered beyond recognition. The vibrant cities he once roamed are now mere husks, their streets filled with unrest and corruption. He stands at the edge of a crumbling kingdom, his heart pounding with purpose. The Three Kings training has transformed him into something far more powerful than he ever imagined. But the question that lingers in his mind is whether the world is ready for someone like him. The moment Rowoon emerges from the sealed realm, he senses the imbalance in the air. The world is on the verge of collapse, its fragile peace shattered by greed and violence. Factions and kingdoms have fractured into ruthless power struggles, leaving the common people to suffer. His first steps into the world are cautious, but as a warrior forged in the harshest of trials, he knows his time to strike has come. His first priority is to gather information. Disguised as a wandering traveler, Rowoon infiltrates several cities, silently observing the chaos that has spread. In dark taverns and smoke-filled rooms, he hears rumors of a once great kingdom now ruled by a corrupt council. He learns that many of his old allies, once revered leaders, have turned into tyrants. Friends he had trusted have betrayed him, while enemies he thought insignificant have risen to power. Everywhere he goes, he encounters betrayal and greed, and he begins to question whether the world he once sought to protect is even worth saving. While gathering intel, Rowoon's path crosses with figures from his past, people who have fallen into either obscurity or madness. One such encounter is with his former mentor, the man who once taught him the path of righteousness. Rowoon had always seen this man as a father figure, but now the truth is revealed. His mentor has been corrupted by power, and his actions have led to the suffering of countless innocents. The reunion forces Rowoon to confront the painful truths of his past. He learns that betrayal isn't always a choice made by others. It's a choice made by the circumstances of a world that's too broken to fix. He sees in his mentor's eyes the same emptiness that once consumed him, and in that moment, Ro-woon realizes that vengeance will not free him. His rage, though, is still a force he cannot deny. Despite the betrayal of his former allies, Ro-woon remains resolute. He has a larger purpose now, to reshape the world that betrayed him and forge a path of his own. With the knowledge and strength gained from the Three Kings, he begins to gather like-minded individuals. He forms alliances with those who have suffered under the same corruption he has, uniting them under a common cause. These are not soldiers or warriors. Most are common folk, merchants, former soldiers, and even exiled nobles who have all witnessed the world's descent into chaos. They are Ro-woon's first true allies, and he becomes their beacon of hope, though he still grapples with his desire for vengeance. Ro-woon's martial prowess, honed under the martial king, becomes a terrifying force. He defeats skilled mercenaries and corrupted knights with ease, his every move an embodiment of the techniques he learned. His body, once frail and weak, is now a finely tuned weapon capable of crushing anything in its path. However, it is his magic, learned under the tutelage of the Magic King, that truly sets him apart. Ro-woon has mastered elemental magic to the point where he can summon fire, lightning, and earth with a mere thought. His magic has become an extension of his will, and he uses it to obliterate his enemies, leaving nothing behind but ashes. But the most dangerous weapon in his arsenal is his mastery over demonic energy, taught by the demonic king. Ro-woon's ability to channel this power has grown even more terrifying. Every time he taps into this dark force, he feels the stirrings of his own rage and hatred. Though he uses it to defeat his enemies, the power threatens to consume him, slowly eroding his humanity. Ro-woon wrestles with this darkness, knowing full well that each battle brings him closer to a point of no return. Despite his fear of losing control, he has learned to wield the power without succumbing to it, at least for now. As Ro-woon navigates this fractured world, he uncovers a dark conspiracy, a shadowy force that has been manipulating the world from behind the scenes. The factions that Ro-woon has been battling are merely puppets, their strings pulled by a much older and more powerful entity. This entity, a long-forgotten godlike being, seeks to plunge the world into eternal chaos, using the corrupt kingdoms as pawns in its larger scheme. The whispers Ro-woon hears speak of a force that can control the very fabric of reality, one that can reshape the world in its image. Ro-woon, with his newfound strength and clarity, realizes that his battle is not just for vengeance, but for the very survival of the world. The stakes have grown higher. He knows that if he doesn't act soon, the entity will enact its plan, and the world will descend into an age of darkness that no one will survive. But to stop this entity, Ro-woon must confront not only the power of his enemies, but also his own inner demons. In the closing moments of Chapter 3, Ro-woon stands at the edge of a precipice, looking out at the horizon where a war between the factions is brewing. The alliances he has formed will soon be tested, and he knows that there will be no turning back. With his mind sharp and his heart steeled by the lessons of the Three Kings, Ro-woon prepares to take the first steps into a war that will determine the fate of the world. But as he steps forward, he feels the weight of the power coursing through him, both a gift and a curse. The time for vengeance is at hand, but Ro-woon knows that his greatest challenge lies in retaining his humanity amidst the dark powers he now commands. The world may be on the brink of destruction, but Ro-woon is ready to reshape it, one battle at a time. Chapter 3 concludes with Ro-woon's declaration of war against the forces that threaten the world, his heart burning with purpose, and his eyes filled with an unyielding fire. The path ahead is uncertain, but he knows one thing for sure. He will stop at nothing to shape the world in his image, for better or worse. Chapter 4 opens with the first signs of war spreading across the fractured kingdoms, and Ro-woon's presence is felt in every corner of the world. The once peaceful cities are now military strongholds, their streets echoing with the march of soldiers and the preparations for battle. But for Ro-woon, this is just the beginning of a much larger conflict. His actions have already begun to stir the hearts of many, both those who seek salvation and those who fear his growing power. Everywhere he goes, whispers follow him. Some call him the fallen hero, while others see him as the reborn king. Ro-woon, however, cares little for the names or titles. His only concern is the destruction of the forces that have plagued the world and the ultimate defeat of the godlike entity lurking in the shadows. Ro-woon's first objective is to gather an army. With the alliances he formed in Chapter 3, he begins to rally the oppressed factions and disillusioned soldiers who long for a leader who can bring true change. These are not the nobility or royalty who have fought for power. These are the common folk who have suffered under tyranny. They are the ones who have nothing left to lose, and Ro-woon knows that their determination and resolve will be the backbone of his rebellion. In the early days of his campaign, Ro-woon faces opposition not from the factions or the corrupt kingdoms, but from those who are afraid of change. Powerful merchant guilds, noble families, and influential politicians begin to move behind the scenes, conspiring against Ro-woon's cause. They see him as a threat to their established order, and they will stop at nothing to ensure that his rebellion does not succeed. Ro-woon learns that the world's corruption is so deep-rooted that even the forces of good are often bound by selfish interests. Despite these challenges, Ro-woon's power continues to grow. His mastery over the martial arts, magic, and demonic energy makes him a one-man army, capable of turning the tide of any battle. His skill in strategy and warfare is unmatched, and his forces rally around him, inspired by his unwavering resolve. But even as his army grows, Ro-woon knows that strength alone will not be enough. He must find a way to strike at the heart of the enemy, the shadowy figure that has manipulated the world's suffering. Ro-woon begins his search for ancient knowledge, seeking out the remnants of forgotten civilizations and lost artifacts that might give him the edge he needs. His journey takes him into the heart of dark forests, across treacherous mountains, and deep into ancient ruins that have not seen the light of day in centuries. Along the way, he encounters beings long thought extinct, powerful mages who have turned to isolation, forgotten gods who have hidden themselves from the world, and mythical creatures who still remember the old ways. One of Ro-woon's most significant encounters is with a reclusive sorceress known as Alara, a woman whose power rivals that of the magic king himself. Alara has spent her life studying the ancient texts of forgotten civilizations, and she possesses knowledge that Ro-woon needs to defeat the godlike entity. But Alara is not easily swayed. She has seen countless heroes rise and fall, and she is skeptical of Ro-woon's ability to succeed. She challenges him, testing his resolve and his wisdom, making him prove that he is worthy of her assistance. Ro-woon, though burdened by the weight of his past, manages to win her trust, not through words, but through actions. He shows her that he is not just a man driven by vengeance, but a leader willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. With Alara's guidance, Ro-woon uncovers an ancient prophecy that speaks of the return of the godlike entity and the destruction it will bring. The prophecy hints at a hidden artifact, a relic of unimaginable power that could tip the balance in Ro-woon's favor. This artifact, known as the Heart of the Abyss, is said to be a key that can unlock the godlike entity's true form and strip it of its near-invincible power. But finding the Heart of the Abyss is no easy task. It is hidden in the heart of a long-forgotten temple, guarded by fierce guardians and protected by traps that have claimed the lives of many who sought its power. Ro-woon, determined to find the Heart of the Abyss, sets out on a perilous journey with a small group of trusted companions, including Alara, a skilled warrior named Kale, and a former mercenary named Yara, who has a deep knowledge of ancient ruins. Together, they travel through desolate lands, navigating deadly traps, and fighting off hordes of monsters that seem to be drawn to their every step. The journey is grueling, and tensions run high as the group faces obstacles that test their loyalty to one another. But through it all, Ro-woon remains focused, his eyes locked on the ultimate goal, the Heart of the Abyss. As the group nears the temple, they encounter more dangers than they ever anticipated. The temple is not only protected by physical traps, but it is also filled with illusions that prey on the darkest fears of those who enter. Ro-woon, guided by his training under the Magic King, is able to see through these illusions and lead his group to the temple's inner sanctum. But even then, they are met with the temple's greatest challenge, a guardian that is both a physical and mental trial. The guardian, an ancient being imbued with both magic and demonic energy, is unlike anything Ro-woon has ever faced. It is a manifestation of the temple's power, and it tests Ro-woon not only in combat but in his resolve. The Guardian uses every trick in its arsenal, illusions, mind control, and elemental magic, to try to break Ro-woon's spirit. But Ro-woon, having faced his own inner darkness, refuses to yield. With the combined strength of his companions and his own unshakable will, he defeats the Guardian, proving that he is worthy of the heart of the abyss. As Chapter 4 closes, Ro-woon and his companions stand before the heart of the abyss, its dark energy pulsating with power. They have reached the end of their journey, but Ro-woon knows that this is only the beginning of the true battle. The heart of the abyss may hold the key to defeating the godlike entity, but it also brings with it great danger. As Ro-woon reaches out to claim it, he feels the weight of the world on his shoulders. The path ahead will not be easy, and the choices he makes now will determine the fate of everything he holds dear. Chapter 5 begins with Ro-woon holding the heart of the abyss, the dark artifact pulsing with an ominous energy in his hand. The moment he grasps it, he feels an immense surge of power, but also a creeping sense of unease. The artifact hums with an ancient force, one that seems to call to something deep within him. Ro-woon knows that this power is not just a tool. It is a temptation, one that threatens to consume him. But he has no choice but to press forward. The godlike entity he must face requires more than just brute strength and magic. It requires understanding, cunning, and the mastery of forces darker than anything Ro-woon has encountered before. With the heart of the abyss in his possession, Ro-woon sets out to make his final preparations for the upcoming battle. He knows that the forces of the corrupted factions will soon unite against him, but he also realizes that the real threat lies beyond them. The godlike entity that has manipulated the world from the shadows. The time for subtlety and small skirmishes is over. Ro-woon must now prepare for a war unlike any the world has ever seen. Ro-woon returns to his army, rallying his forces for the final confrontation. His companions, Alera, Kale, and Yara, remain by his side, each of them having grown stronger through their shared experiences. Alera's magical expertise, Kale's battlefield prowess, and Yara's knowledge of the ancient world will be crucial in the coming war. Ro-woon addresses his army, his words filled with a fire that inspires both fear and hope in those who hear them. He speaks not only of vengeance but of a new world, a world that will no longer be bound by corruption, betrayal, and the oppressive rule of the godlike entity. However, Ro-woon knows that gathering his army is just the first step. To defeat the godlike entity, he must first understand its true nature. The heart of the abyss, though powerful, is not enough on its own. Ro-woon seeks out Alera's guidance once more, knowing that her knowledge of ancient texts might hold the key to unlocking the secrets of the entity. Together, they scour forgotten libraries and ruined temples, searching for any fragment of information that might help them in their fight. They uncover an ancient prophecy that speaks of the godlike entity's origins, revealing that it is not a being born of this world, but a cosmic force that transcends time and space. This entity was once imprisoned in the heart of the abyss, but its power was so immense that even the gods could not contain it. Instead, they sealed it away, hoping that the world would forget its existence. Over the centuries, however, the entity's influence seeped into the world, corrupting the hearts of men and gods alike. It is a being that thrives on chaos, fear, and destruction, and its ultimate goal is to bring about the end of all things. Ro-woon is shaken by this revelation. He had always believed the entity to be just another powerful adversary, but now he understands the full scope of the threat. The entity's influence is not just physical. It is psychological, spiritual, and emotional. It feeds on the despair and darkness within the hearts of individuals, twisting them into instruments of its will. Ro-woon realizes that to defeat it, he must confront not only its power but the darkness within himself. As Ro-woon prepares for the final battle, he begins to question his own motivations. His thirst for vengeance has driven him this far, but he knows that revenge alone will not save the world. The heart of the abyss may give him the power to defeat the entity, but it may also corrupt him in the process. Ro-woon begins to fear that he is no different from the very tyrants he has fought against. He wonders if the heart of the abyss is as much a curse as it is a blessing. Can he truly wield its power without losing himself? To answer these questions, Rowoon retreats into solitude, meditating on the teachings of the three kings. He reflects on the lessons of the martial king, who taught him the importance of inner strength and resilience. He recalls the magic king's words about the clarity of mind and the manipulation of perception, and he remembers the demonic king's harsh lessons on embracing one's inner darkness without being consumed by it. In this moment of introspection, Rowoon comes to a realization. True strength does not come from the power one possesses but from the ability to control that power. It is not the heart of the abyss that will define him. It is his will, his resolve, and his heart. With newfound clarity, Rowoon returns to his army, his mind sharpened and his spirit tempered. He knows that the final battle is not just a physical confrontation. It is a battle for his soul. He must defeat the godlike entity, but he must also overcome the darkness that lies within him. The war he faces is as much internal as it is external. The day of the final battle arrives. Rowoon and his army march toward the heart of the enemy's domain, a fortress of unimaginable power built atop a mountain of bones. The skies are darkened by the swirling energies of the godlike entity, its presence casting a shadow over the land. The forces of the corrupted factions have united, their armies standing ready for the coming war. Rowoon knows that this battle will decide the fate of the world, but he also understands that it will decide his own fate. As Rowoon's forces clash with the enemy, the battle is like none before it. The earth trembles as the armies collide, magic and steel intertwining in a storm of destruction. Rowoon's army fights with all the strength and determination they possess, but it is Rowoon himself who leads them, cutting through the battlefield with the precision and power of a force of nature. His mastery of martial arts, magic, and demonic energy overwhelms his enemies, but as he fights, he feels the weight of the heart of the abyss pressing down on him. The more he uses its power, the more he feels the entity's influence trying to seep into his soul. In the midst of the battle, Rowoon faces his greatest test. The godlike entity reveals itself, a monstrous, shifting form that defies comprehension. It is a being of pure chaos, a force that warps reality itself. Rowoon can feel its power, its insatiable hunger for destruction, as it bears down on him. But instead of succumbing to fear, Rowoon draws upon the lessons he has learned. He faces the entity not with hatred or vengeance, but with clarity and resolve. He channels the heart of the abyss, not to destroy, but to bind the entity's power. In that moment, Rowoon understands that the heart is not just a weapon. It is a prison, one that can contain the entity's power if used correctly. The final confrontation is a battle of wills. The entity fights to break free, but Rowoon's control over the heart of the abyss holds steady. As the battle rages on, Rowoon uses every ounce of his strength to keep the entity contained, drawing upon the power of the three kings' teachings and the inner strength he has cultivated over the years. With one final, devastating blow, Rowoon seals the entity once again within the heart of the abyss, ending its reign of terror. But the cost is great. As the entity is sealed away, Rowoon feels its influence begin to pull at him, threatening to consume him. The heart of the abyss pulses violently, and for a moment, it seems as though Rowoon will be swallowed by its darkness. But then, he makes a choice. He releases the heart, allowing its power to dissipate into the world, freeing himself from its grip. Chapter 6 opens with Rowoon standing in the ruins of the final battlefield, the winds sweeping across the land as the echoes of war fade into silence. The sky, once darkened by the godlike entity's influence, begins to clear, the first light of dawn breaking through the clouds. The world has been saved, but the victory feels bittersweet. Rowoon's body bears the scars of countless battles, his soul burdened with the weight of all that has transpired. The heart of the abyss is no longer in his possession, and with it, the source of the entity's power has been sealed away. Yet the darkness it left behind lingers. Rowoon stands alone on the battlefield, his gaze lost in thought. The world has been saved, but what is the cost? The destruction of the godlike entity may have ended its reign, but it has also left a power vacuum in its wake. The corrupt factions that once ruled have collapsed, and the lands are now a patchwork of fractured kingdoms, each vying for control. The people of the world are free, but they are also lost, unsure of what to do now that the force that kept them in check has been removed. Rowoon knows that the real work is just beginning. He has freed the world from the tyranny of the godlike entity, but the future of the world depends on how its people rebuild. Rowoon returns to his army, which has been crucial in securing the final victory. Though the battle is over, the war for peace has only just begun. His army, once a ragtag group of oppressed soldiers and outcasts, has grown into a powerful force in its own right. Now, Rowoon must navigate the delicate balance of power, forging alliances and breaking old enmities. His leadership is tested once again, but this time, he is not alone. The people who fought alongside him, Alera, Kale, Yara, and the other key figures, are now his trusted advisors, each offering their unique perspective on how to move forward. One of the first tasks Rowoon faces is the reconstruction of the world's shattered cities and nations. While many of the corrupt rulers have been defeated or overthrown, there are still remnants of their influence scattered throughout the world. Some of these factions seek to maintain their power, while others, disillusioned by the events of the war, are content to retreat into isolation. Rowoon knows that to prevent further bloodshed, he must unite the fractured kingdoms. But the process is far from easy. In his search for a path to peace, Rowoon travels to several of the war-torn cities. These places, once teeming with life, now lie in ruin. The streets are filled with displaced refugees, families torn apart by the violence of the war. Rowoon speaks with the people, listening to their hopes and fears. He finds that while they are grateful for the defeat of the godlike entity, they are also uncertain about what comes next. Many of the people have lost their homes, their families, and their faith in the system. They are tired of fighting and long for stability. It is during these travels that Rowoon encounters an unexpected ally, a former general from one of the defeated factions. This general, a man named Darien, was once a loyal servant to the corrupt kings, but after witnessing the horrors of the war and the fall of his own kingdom, he has come to see the error of his ways. Darien offers his military expertise to Rowoon, recognizing that only through strategic unity can the world hope to rebuild. Rowoon is wary of Darien's past, but he knows that the world cannot be rebuilt without help from those who once served the old regime. After much deliberation, Rowoon agrees to join forces with him, understanding that their shared goal of peace outweighs their past differences. Together, Rowoon and Darien begin the slow process of uniting the fractured kingdoms. They work tirelessly to broker peace treaties, offering land and resources to those who surrender their weapons. But not all factions are willing to accept peace. There are those who seek to exploit the chaos, using fear and violence to seize power for themselves. Rowoon finds himself facing new enemies, smaller, more elusive factions that operate in the shadows, stirring up unrest among the people. These groups, while not as powerful as the former rulers, are dangerous in their ability to incite rebellion and sow discord. As the political landscape shifts, Rowoon's attention turns once more to the heart of the abyss. Though he no longer possesses it, the heart's lingering presence continues to haunt him. The darkness that the entity left behind is still very much alive, corrupting the hearts of the powerful and the powerless alike. Rowoon learns that some of the corrupted factions have sought to find and reawaken the heart, believing that its power will allow them to rule the world once more. Rowoon knows that he cannot allow this to happen, and so he begins a dangerous journey to locate and destroy the remaining fragments of the heart before they can fall into the wrong hands. In the process of searching for the heart's remnants, Rowoon faces enemies who are just as cunning and ruthless as the godlike entity itself. These new adversaries are individuals who, like him, seek power, but unlike Rowoon, they are not driven by the desire for justice or peace. They are motivated by greed, ambition, and the thirst for domination. Rowoon must navigate this new web of intrigue, relying on his allies and the teachings of the three kings to survive. Through it all, Rowoon is constantly reminded of his internal struggle. Though he has conquered the external threats to the world, he has not yet conquered the darkness within himself. The heart of the abyss, though no longer in his possession, still calls to him, its influence ever present. Ro-woon begins to doubt whether he is truly in control, or whether the heart's power still lingers within him, waiting for the moment when he will finally succumb to it. In a moment of introspection, Ro-woon travels to the place where the final battle took place, standing alone on the battlefield once again. The memories of the war, the pain, the loss, and the sacrifices weigh heavily on his heart. He reflects on the teachings of the three kings, his training under the martial king, the magic king, and the demonic king, and how far he has come. He realizes that, while the world may have been saved, his own journey is far from over. The battle within himself is still ongoing, and the future of the world depends on whether he can truly overcome the darkness that lies within him. Chapter 6 ends with Ro-woon standing on the edge of the battlefield, gazing out over the ruins of the old world and the fragile hope of the new one. He is no longer the boy who was betrayed, but neither is he the perfect hero. Ro-woon has become something else, something more complex, something that the world has never seen before. As he takes his first steps toward the rebuilding of the world, he knows that his journey is far from finished. The world may be saved, but there are still many battles to be fought, both on the battlefield and within himself. The future is uncertain, but Ro-woon is no longer afraid. He will forge his own path, whatever the cost. Chapter 7 begins with Ro-woon standing in the heart of the newly formed council, surrounded by representatives from the fractured kingdoms. After months of uneasy negotiations, a tentative peace has taken hold in the world, but the challenge now is to create a stable government that will last. The nations have begun to rebuild, and with Ro-woon's leadership, many of the old wounds are starting to heal. However, the new world is still fragile, and enemies, both old and new, lurk in the shadows. Ro-woon, once a lone warrior seeking vengeance, now finds himself at the forefront of the world's future. He has led the world through the greatest conflict it has ever known, and while the godlike entity has been sealed away and the remnants of the corrupt factions are being dealt with, Ro-woon knows that true peace cannot come from the mere absence of war. He is burdened with the weight of his responsibilities, realizing that the path ahead is not as simple as defeating a single enemy. As Ro-woon takes on his new role, the council meetings are tense. Different factions and kingdoms seek to claim dominance over the others. Some still harbor grudges, while others desire revenge or power. Ro-woon's presence and influence, along with the support of his loyal companions, Ilera, Kale, Yara, and Darien, are the only things keeping the fragile alliances from crumbling. Yet, even with his growing power, Ro-woon finds himself at odds with the very system he helped create. The ideal of peace and unity seems impossible to fully achieve, and the council members, many of whom are former generals and rulers from the fallen factions, continue to play their power games in the shadows. Ro-woon's internal struggles grow more pronounced. Though he has defeated the godlike entity and secured the world's safety, he still feels the pull of darkness from within. The power of the heart of the abyss, though sealed away, left a permanent scar on him. He often finds himself haunted by nightmares, visions of the entity's twisted form, whispers of temptation calling to him from the depths of his soul. He fears that the darkness is not just external, but something that has become part of him. Ro-woon begins to doubt his ability to control the very power that saved the world. He is afraid that one day, that darkness will consume him, just as it once threatened to consume the heart. In his attempt to maintain control, Ro-woon decides to return to the place where he trained under the three kings. He seeks solace in the memory of their teachings, hoping that by meditating on their lessons, he can find the peace he so desperately needs. Each king's lesson has shaped him into the warrior he is today, but now he needs something more. He needs guidance not on how to defeat an external enemy, but on how to conquer the enemy within. The journey back to the three kings' training grounds is long and exhausting, but Ro-woon is determined to face the internal battle that has plagued him for so long. He finds himself standing before the altar where he once received the final words of the three kings. As he meditates in the quiet space, he recalls the wisdom each king imparted to him. The martial king taught him that strength comes from within, that his body was both his weapon and his vessel. The magic king showed him that perception and focus can shape the world itself. The demonic king reminded him that darkness could be a source of power, but it must be harnessed and controlled. Rowoon realizes that he has relied too heavily on the teachings of the demonic king. The balance between light and darkness within him has never been fully understood, and the power that once made him unstoppable is now a constant source of inner conflict. He faces the truth that in seeking revenge, he may have embraced a darkness that now threatens to undo him. The lingering feeling that he is not in control of his own fate begins to gnaw at him, and he questions whether he can ever truly be free of the influence that haunts him. It is during this time of deep reflection that Rowoon experiences a breakthrough. He understands that the key to conquering the darkness is not to banish it, but to embrace it fully and accept its presence within him. He remembers the lessons of the martial king. True strength comes from accepting all parts of oneself, even the parts that are not easy to confront. The demonic king's teachings were not about embracing destruction, but about mastering one's inner turmoil. With this realization, Rowoon feels a profound sense of peace. He no longer fears the darkness that lives within him because he understands it, and in understanding it, he finds the strength to control it. Armed with this newfound clarity, Rowoon returns to the council with a renewed sense of purpose. He knows that the world cannot heal through strength alone. The political struggles that still plague the nations must be dealt with through diplomacy, understanding, and empathy. Rowoon begins to push for reforms, advocating for the creation of a true council of nations where all voices, no matter how small, are heard and valued. The process is slow, and not everyone agrees with his vision, but Rowoon is undeterred. He knows that true peace will not come overnight, and that his role is to help guide the world toward a better future, one step at a time. As the months pass, Rowoon's leadership begins to show results. He brokers peace deals between warring factions, works to rebuild the damaged cities, and fosters trade and cooperation between kingdoms. The council, though still flawed, becomes more cooperative, and the world begins to show signs of healing. But as Rowoon is starting to feel a sense of accomplishment, a new threat emerges on the horizon. In the farthest reaches of the world, rumors of a new, powerful enemy begin to spread. This enemy is unlike any Rowoon has faced before. It is not a force of darkness or destruction, but a force of manipulation and subversion. A mysterious organization has begun to gather power in the shadows, quietly undermining the fragile alliances Rowoon has worked so hard to build. This group, known only as the Whispering Hand, works through spies, assassins, and influential agents placed within the highest levels of government. They manipulate leaders and foment rebellion, all in the name of creating chaos. Rowoon knows that the world is once again on the brink of disaster. Though he has conquered his inner demons, the world's battle is far from over. The fragile peace he fought so hard to establish is now threatened by this unseen enemy. Rowoon must gather his allies once again, prepare for a battle of shadows, and confront the new threat that seeks to tear apart everything he has built. Chapter 8 opens with a sense of tension settling over the world that Rowoon fought so hard to rebuild. The fragile peace he had worked toward is now on the brink of collapse. The shadowy organization known as the Whispering Hand has become an ever-growing threat, working behind the scenes to unravel the careful alliances Rowoon had crafted. Rowoon spies report that influential leaders from the council are being manipulated, their decisions swayed by invisible strings, and rebellion is beginning to stir in the less stable regions of the world. As Rowoon contemplates the weight of this new enemy, he realizes that the battle ahead will not be fought on the battlefield, but in the realm of politics, espionage, and subterfuge. The Whispering Hand is an organization unlike any other he has faced. Its members are skilled in the art of infiltration, able to sow distrust and chaos with a single whispered word. Rowoon knows that to defeat them, he will need more than just brute force. He must rely on his mind and the alliances he has made. To prepare for the coming conflict, Rowoon calls upon his most trusted allies, Alara, Kale, Yara, and Darien. Together, they begin to strategize, forming a plan to uncover the Whispering Hand's true identity and roots. Rowoon knows that they cannot fight what they cannot see, and so his first priority is to identify the organization's members and their network of influence. He and his allies begin a covert operation to infiltrate key locations, seeking information about the Whispering Hand's structure and operations. As Ro-woon digs deeper into the organization's network, he uncovers shocking truths. The Whispering Hand's influence stretches far beyond what he initially imagined. It has its tendrils in nearly every kingdom, and its agents are embedded in all levels of society. Former leaders who had once supported Ro-woon's cause are now being quietly turned against him, swayed by promises of power or threats of violence. The more Ro-woon uncovers, the more he realizes that the Whispering Hand's leader is not just another power-hungry ruler. They are a mastermind, a shadow manipulator who has been planning this for years. Ro-woon's search for the leader of the Whispering Hand leads him to unexpected places, including underground networks of resistance fighters who oppose the organization's subversive actions. Among these rebels, Ro-woon finds a young woman named Arya, a former member of the Whispering Hand who defected after discovering the true nature of the group. Arya offers Ro-woon crucial information, but in exchange, she demands a promise from him, that he will stop the Whispering Hand, not with force, but by exposing its members for who they truly are. She explains that the organization thrives on secrecy, that its members hide behind facades of power and influence, and that the only way to defeat them is to strip away their masks and reveal them to the world. Reluctantly, Ro-woon agrees to Arya's terms, and together they begin the task of carefully gathering evidence of the Whispering Hand's crimes. But as they get closer to their goal, the dangers grow. The Whispering Hand is aware of their movements, and soon, Ro-woon and his allies are being hunted by the very agents they seek to expose. Tensions rise as the group is forced to take increasingly drastic measures to protect themselves. In one particularly harrowing encounter, Kale and Yara barely escape an assassination attempt orchestrated by the Whispering Hand. Their near-death experience serves as a stark reminder of just how dangerous this enemy is. Amidst the chaos, Ro-woon finds himself increasingly frustrated. His mind, once sharp and confident, begins to waver. The weight of the task ahead, combined with his lingering fears of the darkness within him, clouds his judgment. He begins to question whether he is truly the right leader for this battle. Can he overcome the subtle threat of the Whispering Hand, or will its manipulation ultimately defeat him? And more troubling still, is he becoming the very thing he once fought against? The kind of leader who manipulates others for his own ends? It is during one of his moments of doubt that Ro-woon receives a visit from an unexpected source. Darien, his former enemy turned trusted ally. Darien, who had fought against Ro-woon in the past, now seeks to offer him guidance. Darien recognizes the turmoil within Ro-woon's heart and reminds him of the lessons they learned during their darkest hours. He tells Ro-woon that true leadership does not come from perfection but from the willingness to face one's own flaws and continue moving forward, no matter the odds. Ro-woon, though hesitant, realizes that Darien's words hold weight. In the end, it is not his perfection or invincibility that will lead him to victory. It is his determination to protect those who rely on him, even when he himself feels uncertain. With renewed purpose, Ro-woon doubles down on his efforts to expose the Whispering Hand. Using the information gathered by Arya and his team, he arranges a massive public reveal, where the true nature of the organization is finally exposed. The people, who had been manipulated by the Whispering Hand's schemes for so long, are shocked and enraged. Ro-woon's plan is risky, but it works. The members of the Whispering Hand, once cloaked in secrecy, are brought into the light. Their influence begins to unravel, and their network of corruption is destroyed from the inside out. However, the battle is far from over. The leader of the Whispering Hand, the mastermind who has been orchestrating everything from behind the scenes, remains elusive. Ro-woon's victory is hollow until he can confront this shadowy figure and end the threat once and for all. The mastermind, it turns out, is a figure from Ro-woon's past, someone he thought he had left behind long ago. This revelation sends shockwaves through Ro-woon, forcing him to confront painful memories of betrayal, guilt, and loss. The confrontation with this figure will test Ro-woon's resolve like never before. As the chapter draws to a close, Ro-woon prepares for the final showdown with the leader of the Whispering Hand. The stakes are higher than ever. If he fails, the world will fall back into chaos. But Ro-woon is no longer the same man he once was. The training of the Three Kings, the battles he has fought, and the lessons he has learned have prepared him for this moment. With his heart steeled and his mind clear, he steps into the unknown, knowing that this final confrontation will determine not just the fate of the world, but the very man he has become. Chapter 9 opens with Lee Ro-woon preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the leader of the Whispering Hand. The weight of the world feels even heavier now, knowing that the final battle will not only decide the fate of the kingdoms, but will also force him to confront a part of his past that he has long tried to bury. His companions, Alara, Kale, Yara, Darien, and Arya, stand by his side, ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. Though they are filled with doubt and fear, they are united by their loyalty to Ro-woon, and their trust in him remains unshaken. The leader of the Whispering Hand, a man known only as the Masked King, has been a shadow in Ro-woon's life for far too long. Over the years, this figure has been a silent manipulator, pulling strings in the shadows to destabilize kingdoms, create chaos, and sow distrust. Ro-woon now knows that this enemy is someone he has encountered before, someone he once thought of as a brother. The Masked King is none other than Ro-woon's long-lost sibling, a brother thought dead in the early days of his childhood. Ro-woon's heart is torn as he prepares for this confrontation. The thought of facing his brother, now transformed into a mastermind of chaos, stirs up painful memories. The sibling he had loved, protected, and looked up to was lost to him when they were separated by a tragedy that Ro-woon has spent years trying to forget. But now, he is forced to face the truth. His brother has been alive all these years, secretly working to destroy everything Ro-woon has worked to rebuild. Ro-woon is conflicted. Can he truly fight the one person who shares his blood? Will he be able to bring his brother to justice, or will his deep-rooted love for him cloud his judgment? The emotional turmoil inside Ro-woon is palpable, and his companions are aware of his internal struggle. They understand that this battle is not just about defeating an enemy, but about healing a wound that has been left open for far too long. The journey to the Masked King's lair is treacherous. Ro-woon and his team must navigate through dangerous terrain, including heavily guarded fortresses, cursed forests, and labyrinthine tunnels that have been constructed to keep intruders out. Along the way, they encounter fierce resistance from the Whispering Hand's agents, assassins, spies, and mercenaries trained in the darkest arts. Ro-woon's martial prowess, Kale's archery, Alara's magic, Yara's stealth, Darien's swordsmanship, and Arya's knowledge of the Whispering Hand's tactics combine in a beautiful display of teamwork as they fight to make their way forward. Despite the relentless assault from the Whispering Hand's forces, the team presses on, determined to reach the Masked King. As they approach the final location, an ancient temple hidden deep within the mountains, Ro-woon's anxiety grows. He knows that the end of this journey will force him to make the hardest decision of his life. Should he try to reason with his brother, or is he too far gone to be saved? The temple is a grand structure, its design ancient and enigmatic. Inside, Ro-woon and his team encounter a series of trials that test not only their physical abilities, but also their mental and emotional fortitude. Each room seems to reflect an aspect of Ro-woon's past, drawing out memories of his childhood and his time with his brother. The trials are not just obstacles, but psychological challenges meant to weaken Ro-woon's resolve. His brother, it seems, knows him well, too well, and the Masked King seeks to exploit Ro-woon's deepest fears and regrets. In one trial, Ro-woon is forced to relive the moment he was separated from his brother. He sees the bloodshed, the chaos, and the fear in his younger self's eyes. The emotions flood back, threatening to overwhelm him. But Ro-woon finds strength in the lessons he learned from the Three Kings. He knows that to move forward, he must confront his past head-on. The trial ends with Ro-woon's acceptance of what happened, a release of the guilt that had chained him for so long. With that, he and his team are able to progress deeper into the temple. At last, Ro-woon and his companions reach the final chamber, the heart of the Masked King's lair. The room is vast and dark, illuminated only by the dim glow of candles and ancient symbols etched into the stone walls. In the center of the room stands a throne made of black stone, upon which the Masked King sits, cloaked in shadows. His face is hidden by a golden mask, and his voice is cold and unrecognizable, though it carries the weight of someone who has seen countless years of manipulation and destruction. "You've come for me, little brother," the masked king says, his tone dripping with venomous affection. "I knew you would. You always were so predictable." Rowoon steps forward, his heart heavy but his resolve unshakable. "I've come to stop you, not to mourn the past," he responds. "You've led countless lives to ruin, manipulated nations, and destroyed everything I worked to build. You've become a shadow of the man I once knew." The masked king laughs, his voice echoing in the chamber. "You still think I'm the same as before? I am no longer the naive boy you remember. I have learned, just as you did. Power is everything, Rowoon. Power is what defines us. And you, of all people, should understand that now." The brothers lock eyes, the tension between them palpable. Rowoon's mind races as he tries to reach the man he once called brother. "It doesn't have to be like this," Rowoon pleads. "We can still stop this. You don't have to keep fighting against the world we once dreamed of." But the masked king only shakes his head, the coldness in his gaze intensifying. "You never understood, Rowoon. The world is nothing but a chessboard, and we are its players. I was never meant to be a pawn, and neither were you." With that, the battle begins. Rowoon and the masked king clash in an epic duel, their skills honed by years of training and battle. Each strike is a reflection of their shared past. The bond they once had now torn asunder by years of betrayal and ambition. Rowoon draws upon all of his strength, his martial prowess, his magic, and even the demonic energy he once feared. But his brother proves to be an equally formidable adversary. The fight is brutal, both physically and emotionally. Rowoon's strikes land with devastating force, but his brother counterattacks with the same cold precision, his every move calculated and merciless. The masked king's mastery over manipulation and shadows proves to be a powerful advantage, as he uses illusions and tricks to throw Rowoon off balance. Finally, as the battle reaches its climax, Rowoon is faced with a choice: to kill his brother and end the reign of terror, or to show mercy and attempt to save him. The masked king, sensing Rowoon's hesitation, taunts him. "Do it, Rowoon. You're just like me. You've always been." Rowoon's mind races, but in the end, he makes the only choice he can. He will not let the darkness consume him, no matter the cost. Chapter 10 begins with the aftermath of the intense and heart-wrenching battle between Lee Rowoon and his brother, the masked king. The air in the ancient temple is thick with tension, the remnants of their brutal duel scattered across the stone floor. Rowoon stands in the center of the room, his body bruised and battered, his breath ragged. His eyes, once filled with uncertainty and anguish, are now clouded with the weight of the choices he has made. The masked king lies motionless on the ground, his golden mask cracked, revealing a face twisted by years of darkness and bitterness. For a moment, time seems to stand still. Rowoon stares down at his brother, conflicted. He had hoped for a different outcome, one where he could save the man he had once called family. But that hope was shattered the moment the masked king made his choice. There had been no room for redemption in his heart, only the cold drive for power and destruction. Rowoon kneels beside his brother, the memories of their shared childhood flooding back. He remembers the days before the tragedy, when they were inseparable, when his brother was someone he admired and loved deeply. But that person was gone, replaced by a man consumed by ambition and darkness. The sorrow in Rowoon's heart is palpable, but it is not regret. He knows he did what he had to do, for the sake of the world and the people he has sworn to protect. "Why, brother?" Rowoon whispers, his voice thick with emotion. "Why couldn't you see that there was another way?" The silence in the room is deafening. The masked king does not respond. Rowoon stands, his heart heavy with the burden of the decision he has made. He turns to his companions, Alara, Kale, Yara, Darian, and Arya, who stand in the doorway, watching the scene unfold in silence. Each of them has their own thoughts and feelings about what has just transpired, but they say nothing. They know that the cost of this victory is far greater than any of them could have imagined. "We've won," Rowoon says quietly, though the words feel hollow. "But at what cost?" The group is silent for a moment before Alara steps forward, placing a hand on Rowoon's shoulder. "The cost is high, Rowoon," she says softly. "But you made the right choice. The Masked King was lost to us long before this battle. You did what you had to do." Rowoon nods, his gaze distant. He understands what Alara is saying, but the truth of it is harder to accept. He had hoped for a different ending, one where his brother could have been saved, but some things cannot be undone. The world is a harsh place, and sometimes, even those we love are beyond saving. With the Masked King's defeat, the Whispering Hand crumbles. Rowoon's forces move quickly to dismantle the remaining cells of the organization, exposing its hidden leaders and dismantling its influence over the kingdoms. The revelation of the Masked King's true identity shocks the world. His years of manipulation and subterfuge are laid bare for all to see. The chaos he had wrought begins to unravel, and slowly, the pieces of the shattered world begin to heal. But Rowoon knows that this victory is only temporary. The forces of darkness that once followed the Masked King are still out there, and new threats will emerge in time. The battle is never truly over, and Rowoon must remain vigilant. The price of peace is constant vigilance, and Rowoon is prepared to continue the fight, no matter the cost. As the weeks pass, Rowoon retreats to a quiet, secluded part of the kingdom to reflect on the events that have transpired. His mind is a whirlwind of thoughts, emotions, and doubts. He has achieved what many thought impossible, but at what cost? He wonders if the power he has gained through the teachings of the Three Kings has truly made him a better man, or if it has simply hardened him, turning him into something else entirely. It is during this time of introspection that Rowoon receives a visit from Darien, who has remained by his side throughout the entire ordeal. Darien, ever the stoic and reliable companion, has noticed the changes in Rowoon since the defeat of the Masked King. He knows that Rowoon is struggling to come to terms with the aftermath of his victory. "Rowoon," Darien says, his voice low and measured. "I know you're carrying a heavy burden, but you're not alone. You never have been. You've always had us by your side, and you always will." Rowoon looks up, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "I don't know if I can keep going, Darien," he admits. "The weight of it all is too much. I've lost so much, and even now, I'm not sure if I can continue on this path." Darien steps closer, offering a reassuring smile. "You're stronger than you realize, Rowoon. You've faced death, betrayal, and darkness, and you're still standing. You're more than capable of carrying this burden. You don't have to do it alone." Rowoon takes a deep breath, his heart calming as he considers Darien's words. He knows his journey isn't over. There will be more battles, more sacrifices, but he has his allies, and he has himself. He must continue the fight, not just for his own redemption, but for the future of the world he is working to rebuild. As the days pass, Rowoon begins to emerge from his self-imposed exile, determined to rebuild the fractured kingdoms and bring lasting peace to the lands. The scars of war are still fresh, and there is much work to be done, but Rowoon is ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead. He will not allow the darkness that once consumed his brother to take root again. He will lead the world toward a brighter future, even if it means making more difficult choices along the way. The chapter concludes with Rowoon standing at the edge of a cliff, gazing out over the vast expanse of the kingdom he has fought so hard to protect. The sun is setting, casting a warm glow over the land, and for the first time in a long while, Rowoon feels a glimmer of hope. The journey has been long, and the road ahead is uncertain, but he knows that he will face it with the strength and resolve he has forged through fire. "I will never stop," Rowoon whispers to himself, his voice filled with determination. "I will fight for the future. I will fight for them." With that, he turns and walks toward the horizon, ready to continue his journey, whatever it may hold. Chapter 11 begins with Rowoon standing at a crossroads, the weight of his decisions heavy on his shoulders. The battle against his brother, the Masked King, has ended, but a new chapter of his journey is about to begin. The kingdoms are beginning to rebuild, and the whispers of peace are in the air. But for Rowoon, there is no true rest. He knows that the work ahead will be just as difficult as the trials he has already endured. The scars of war are not easily healed, and while the world may seem to be moving toward a fragile peace, there are darker forces still lurking beneath the surface. Rowoon's companions, Elara, Kale, Yara, Darien, and Arya, have all remained steadfast by his side, their bonds strengthened through the shared hardships of the past. Together, they have faced the chaos of the Whispering Hand and the corruption of Rowoon's own blood. But their journey is far from over. New threats are emerging from the shadows, and the peace they fought so hard to protect is more fragile than ever. Rowoon knows that his role as a leader has only just begun. As Rowoon takes a moment to reflect on his journey, he receives an unexpected visit from an old ally, Master Sung, a wise and powerful figure from his past. Sung, who had once been a mentor to Rowoon during his early training under the Three Kings, has been tracking strange occurrences in the land. He arrives with troubling news. A new faction, known only as the Silent Order, has begun to rise in power. This organization operates in the shadows, using covert tactics to influence political leaders, assassinate key figures, and destabilize regions that have already begun to heal from the effects of the Whispering Hand. Rowoon, Master Sung begins, his voice grave. There is something far darker brewing in the world, something that even I cannot fully understand. The Silent Order is not just a political faction. They are a cult, driven by an ideology that seeks to undo the very foundations of the kingdoms you fought to protect. They are after something far greater than power. They are after control over the very essence of magic itself. The words send a chill down Rowoon's spine. He recalls his time training under the Magic King and the deep understanding he gained of mana and magic's true nature. To control magic itself was no small feat. It was a dangerous, forbidden path that could lead to untold destruction. The thought of such a power falling into the wrong hands sends a surge of dread through Rowoon's heart. The Silent Order is operating in secrecy, Master Sung continues, but they have already begun to infiltrate the highest echelons of society. They manipulate events from behind the scenes, pulling the strings of rulers and influencing the fate of nations. We cannot afford to let them succeed. If they gain control of magic in its purest form, it will be the end of everything. Rowoon listens carefully, his mind racing. He knows that he cannot ignore this new threat. His victories so far have been hard-earned, and the thought of losing everything to an unseen enemy is unbearable. But before he can respond, Master Sung hands him an ancient scroll, its surface inscribed with runes that Rowoon recognizes immediately. It is a map of sorts, but not one that leads to any physical place. The scroll points to a location in the distant reaches of the land, a place shrouded in mystery and legend. It is known as the Cavern of Shadows, a forbidden place where the veil between the mortal world and the realm of pure mana is said to be thinnest. The Silent Order is seeking something within the Cavern of Shadows, Sung explains. There are whispers of an ancient artifact, one that can amplify magic beyond comprehension. If they find it, there will be no stopping them. Rowoon feels a surge of determination rise within him. This is not just a battle against a faction. It is a battle for the future of the world. He knows what he must do. I will go, Rowoon declares, his voice resolute. I will find the Cavern of Shadows before they do. Whatever it takes, I won't let them get their hands on that power. Master Sung nods, his expression a mix of concern and pride. I knew you would. But know this, Rowoon, the Cavern of Shadows is no ordinary place. It is a realm where reality bends, where time itself may not function as you know it. It will test you in ways you cannot yet understand. Rowoon takes a deep breath, preparing himself for the journey ahead. He knows that this will be the most dangerous mission he has ever undertaken, but it is one he cannot refuse. The fate of the world depends on it. Rowoon assembles his team, and together, they set out on the journey to find the Cavern of Shadows. The path is long and treacherous, winding through desolate lands and forgotten ruins. Along the way, they face numerous challenges, both physical and mental. The terrain itself seems to fight against them, twisting, shifting, and warping as they draw closer to their destination. The first major obstacle they encounter is a dense, cursed forest known as the Forest of Lost Souls. The trees are ancient and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, blocking the sunlight from above. As they venture deeper into the forest, the air grows thick with a sense of dread. Unseen forces seem to watch their every move, and strange, ghostly apparitions appear in the corners of their vision, whispering dark promises of despair. Rowoon's team fights their way through the forest, using all their skills to navigate the treacherous terrain. Alara's magic helps to illuminate the path, dispelling the illusions that cloud their minds, while Kale's sharp eyes keep watch for any hidden dangers. Yara's stealth proves invaluable as she scouts ahead, warning the group of potential threats, and Darian's swordsmanship cuts through any enemies they encounter. Arya, with her extensive knowledge of the Whispering Hand's tactics, provides insight into the psychological warfare the Silent Order might employ. Despite the eerie atmosphere and the constant feeling of being watched, the group pushes forward. Their resolve is unwavering, their determination stronger than the fear that seeks to take root in their hearts. Each of them is driven by the desire to protect the world they fought so hard to save, and they know that their journey will only grow more dangerous from here. As they near the edge of the Forest of Lost Souls, they come across an old hermit, a figure who has lived in isolation for many years. The hermit warns them of the dangers ahead and speaks cryptically of the Cavern of Shadows, telling them that only those who are truly willing to sacrifice everything will be able to find what they seek. The Cavern of Shadows does not reveal itself to the weak, the hermit says, his eyes gleaming with a knowledge Rowoon cannot fully comprehend. It will test you, push you to your limits, and show you truths you may not wish to see. With the hermit's words echoing in their minds, Rowoon and his companions prepare to continue their journey. The Cavern of Shadows is close now, but Rowoon knows that they are not merely walking toward a physical location, they are walking toward a test of everything they have ever believed in. Chapter 12. The Awakening of True Power. The chapter opens with Kale, battered and bloodied, lying amidst the wreckage of a ruined battlefield. The sky is painted with dark crimson clouds, echoing the chaos below. His enemies, merciless assassins from the Crimson Fangs, stand over him, convinced he's moments from death. One assassin sneers, "This is the so-called disciple of the Three Kings?" Pathetic. Kale's vision blurs, his mind flooded with memories, being abandoned, left for dead, and the harsh training under the Three Kings. Their voices echo in his head. King of Blades, strength isn't given, it's carved into your very soul. King of Shadows, fear is your greatest enemy. Master it, and you'll master death itself. King of Wisdom, when your body fails, let your mind ignite the flames of will. As the assassins move in for the final blow, Kale's body trembles, not from fear, but from something awakening deep within. His heartbeat grows louder, thundering like war drums. Suddenly, an explosion of raw energy bursts from him, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. His wounds begin to heal rapidly, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. This is the manifestation of the Triune Core, the hidden power gifted to him by the Three Kings, now fully awakened. Kale grits his teeth, standing tall. You thought I was broken? You've only seen the shell. Now face what's inside. Kale moves like a blur, faster, stronger, more precise than ever before. With the King of Blades' teachings, his sword slashes are flawless, cutting through steel like paper. The King of Shadows' techniques allow him to vanish and reappear, striking from impossible angles. The King of Wisdom's strategy sharpens his instincts, predicting enemy moves before they act. The assassins, once arrogant, are now filled with terror. One tries to escape, but Kale's voice stops him cold. There's no running from your fate. Within moments, the battlefield is silent, save for the wind carrying the dust of defeat. Kale kneels, not from exhaustion, but to reflect. He looks at his trembling hands, not from weakness, but from the overwhelming surge of power. Is this what it means to be their disciple? To wield strength that defies reason, but at what cost? A mysterious figure watches from the shadows, a scout from the Silent Order, an organization Kale has yet to encounter but will soon become his greatest threat. The figure whispers, "So, the disciple has awakened. The Three Kings' legacy lives on, but not for long." The chapter ends with Kale standing amidst the aftermath, his eyes filled with determination, unknowingly stepping into a new war far greater than any he's faced before. Chapter 13. Shadows of the Silent Order. The chapter begins with Kale standing amidst the aftermath of his brutal battle, the ground littered with the defeated assassins of the Crimson Fangs. The winds howl through the desolate landscape, carrying the faint scent of ash and blood. Though victorious, Kale feels the weight of something darker looming, an unseen force watching, waiting. As he gathers his belongings, Kale senses a presence. Emerging from the shadows is the scout of the Silent Order, cloaked in black with a mask concealing his face. His voice is cold, a whisper carried by the wind. Impressive, disciple of the Three Kings. But strength without purpose is meaningless. Kale tightens his grip on his sword, his instincts flaring. And who are you to question my purpose? Without answering, the scout launches an attack with unnatural speed, his movements sharp and fluid. Kale counters, but the scout's fighting style is unfamiliar, blending shadow manipulation with lethal precision. Their clash is fierce, blades sparking under the crimson sky. Kale struggles against the scout's elusive tactics. Despite his newfound power, he realizes he's facing an enemy unlike any before. One who fights not with brute strength, but with calculated, surgical strikes designed to exploit weaknesses. The scout taunts Kale as they fight, revealing fragments of the Silent Order's intentions. We seek not to rule the kingdoms, but to unravel the very foundation of power itself. The Three Kings? Relics of a forgotten era. Their legacy ends with you. Kale's rage ignites, fueling a second surge of energy. Drawing on the Triune Core, he adapts, analyzing the scout's patterns with the King of Wisdom's teachings. He counters with the King of Blade's precision and the King of Shadow's deception. With a swift combination of strikes, Kale disarms the scout, pinning him to the ground. Your order underestimates the strength of legacy. Before Kale can extract more information, the scout smirks and utters a cryptic phrase, activating a self-destructive spell. A dark explosion engulfs the area, forcing Kale to shield himself. When the smoke clears, nothing remains but scorched earth. Though the scout is gone, Kale holds onto a fragment of the scout's mask, a clue to the Silent Order's existence. Determined, he sets out to uncover their true motives, realizing that his journey is no longer just about survival, but about protecting the world from an ancient darkness rising once again. Chapter 14. Echoes of the Forgotten. Kale trudged through the desolate wastelands, the fragment of the scout's mask clutched tightly in his hand. The barren landscape stretched endlessly, marked by jagged rocks and an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional whisper of the wind carrying faint echoes of battles long past. His mind raced with questions about the Silent Order, their motives, and their connection to the ancient powers of the Three Kings. Determined to find answers, he headed toward the ruins of an ancient city, once a thriving metropolis, now reduced to crumbling stone and forgotten memories. Legends spoke of hidden archives beneath the city that could hold the key to understanding the Silent Order. Navigating deeper into the ruins, Kale encountered remnants of old defenses, traps set long ago, still active, guarding secrets buried in time. His skills were put to the test as he maneuvered through collapsing structures, hidden pitfalls, and enchanted barriers. The teachings of the Three Kings guided him, each lesson echoing in his mind, pushing him forward. In the heart of the ruins, Kale discovered a hidden chamber, its entrance marked by the sigil of the Three Kings intertwined with an unfamiliar symbol, the emblem of the Silent Order. The chamber pulsed with a faint, ominous glow. Steeling himself, Kale entered. Ancient tomes and scrolls were scattered across the dusty floor. In the center, an ethereal figure emerged from the shadows, a spectral guardian bound to protect the knowledge within. The guardian spoke in riddles, its voice a blend of sorrow and wisdom. Seeker of truths, bearer of legacies, why do you disturb the echoes of the forgotten? Kale responded with conviction, to uncover the shadows that threaten the light. The Silent Order seeks to destroy what remains of our world's hope. The Guardian tested Kale with illusions of his deepest fears and regrets, challenging his resolve. Memories of his past, his failures, and the faces of those he couldn't save haunted him. But Kale stood firm, drawing strength from his journey and the bonds he had forged. Proving his worth, the Guardian revealed fragments of the Silent Order's origins, a cult born from the remnants of a fallen kingdom, obsessed with controlling the primal forces that govern existence. Their leader, known only as the Architect, sought to rewrite reality itself. With newfound knowledge and a map pointing to the next piece of the puzzle, Kale left the chamber, his purpose clearer than ever. He looked out over the ruins, the first light of dawn breaking through the darkness, symbolizing the hope he carried forward. Chapter 15. The Gathering Storm. Kale pressed forward, the map clutched tightly in his hand, its cryptic symbols guiding him through treacherous paths. The landscape shifted from desolate ruins to dense, mist-laden forests where the air grew heavy with an ancient, oppressive magic. Shadows danced among the trees, whispering secrets of the land's cursed history. Every rustle of leaves and distant howl reminded him that danger lurked around every corner. His journey led him to an isolated mountain pass, known among old legends as the Path of Echoes. Here, the voices of the past were said to merge with the present, distorting reality. Kale's resolve was tested as spectral apparitions emerged, embodying the regrets and doubts he thought he had buried. Memories of his failures, the faces of comrades lost in battle, and whispers of his deepest fears clawed at his mind. Each step forward felt like a battle against his own psyche, but Kale gritted his teeth, refusing to be broken. At the pass's end, Kale discovered a hidden enclave, a sanctuary for those who had resisted the Silent Order's influence. The enclave was a haven of knowledge, protected by a small but fierce group known as the Wardens of the Veil. Their leader, a wise and enigmatic figure named Arion, greeted Kale with cautious respect. Arion's piercing gaze seemed to look beyond Kale's exterior, as if reading the very essence of his soul. Arion revealed that the Silent Order's power was growing, their reach extending into realms both known and forgotten. Their ultimate goal, to awaken an ancient entity sealed by the Three Kings, an entity capable of reshaping existence itself. This revelation sent a chill through Kale, the weight of his mission becoming even more daunting. To stand against them, Kale needed allies, knowledge, and the courage to face unimaginable horrors. The Wardens shared stories of lost artifacts imbued with the essence of the Three Kings, scattered across the land. These relics held the key to countering the Silent Order's dark magic. Determined to gather these artifacts, Kale forged an alliance with the Wardens, his mission evolving from a personal quest to a fight for the very fabric of reality. During his time at the Enclave, Kale trained alongside the Wardens, learning new combat techniques and ancient magical rites. He formed bonds with key members: Lyra, a fierce warrior with unmatched agility; Thalen, a stoic mage who specialized in protective wards; and Nissa, a skilled tracker whose knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable. Their camaraderie grew, each of them driven by a shared purpose. As preparations began, dark omens loomed on the horizon. The sky turned crimson, and a chilling wind carried whispers of an impending catastrophe. Reports came in of entire villages disappearing overnight, and strange, shadowy figures seen lurking near the borders of the Enclave. The Silent Order was on the move, their influence spreading like a plague. One night, under the blood-red moon, the Enclave was attacked. The Silent Order's assassins struck with precision, their shadowy forms blending seamlessly with the darkness. Kale and the Wardens fought valiantly, their combined strength pushing back the attackers. The battle was fierce, with spells clashing and blades ringing through the night. Amidst the chaos, Kale faced a masked assassin whose skills rivaled his own. Their duel was intense, a deadly dance of steel and magic. In the end, Kale emerged victorious, but not without sustaining injuries and witnessing the loss of comrades. The attack served as a grim reminder of the stakes. The Silent Order would stop at nothing to achieve their goal. Kale stood at the Enclave's edge the following morning, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains where the next relic awaited. His body bore fresh scars, but his spirit remained unbroken. "The storm is coming," Arion warned, his voice a solemn echo, "and you are the beacon that must guide us through it." With his heart steeled by purpose and the weight of countless lives resting on his shoulders, Kale set forth into the unknown, the gathering storm a testament to the battles yet to come. Chapter 16. The Shattered Veil. The journey was relentless, each step heavier than the last. Kale and his newfound allies pressed forward, leaving the sanctuary of the Enclave behind. The path ahead was fraught with peril, and the weight of their mission hung over them like a constant storm cloud, threatening to break at any moment. Kale's mind replayed the attack from the night before, the clash of steel, the cries of his comrades, and the coldness of the assassin's gaze. It had been a warning, a cruel reminder that the Silent Order's reach extended far beyond what they had imagined. Their forces were vast, their intentions shrouded in darkness. The relics were no longer just artifacts of power. They were the keys to an ancient war, one that could unravel the very fabric of the world. As they ventured deeper into the wilds, the landscape began to shift again. The once mist-covered forests gave way to barren plains where the wind howled mournfully, carrying with it the scent of decay. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath their feet, as if it sensed the approach of something far more sinister. Kale could feel the oppressive energy growing stronger, as though the land itself was being warped by unseen forces. Nissa, ever watchful, spoke up first. Something is wrong here. The air feels thick, like we're walking through a veil between worlds. Lyra, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade, nodded. I sense it too. We're being watched. Kale's instincts flared. He had long been attuned to the subtle signs of danger, but this felt different, more ancient, more powerful. His gaze swept over the barren plains, searching for any sign of movement. The sky above had turned a dull gray, and the winds picked up, carrying with them whispers that seemed to call his name. It's the Silent Order, Thalen said, his voice low. They're getting closer. We need to find the next relic before they do. The group quickened their pace, knowing that time was running out. They crossed the desolate terrain, the silence between them thick with tension. The further they traveled, the more Kale felt the presence of someone, looming over them. The relic they sought lay within an ancient temple, its location marked on the map, but it was not a place that would yield its secrets easily. By the time they reached the temple's entrance, night had fallen, and the temperature had dropped sharply. The massive stone doors loomed before them, covered in intricate carvings that told stories of battles long past. These were the kind of stories Kale had come to dread, the kind that spoke of the fall of kingdoms, the rise of forgotten gods, and the ruin brought by the Silent Order. Arion had warned them that the relics were not just objects of power, but tests of will, designed to break those who sought them. Kale knew that this temple would not be any different. Stay alert, Kale ordered, his voice steady despite the growing unease. We don't know what we'll find inside. The doors creaked open with an eerie groan, revealing a vast, darkened hall. The air inside was thick with the stench of mildew and old magic, the shadows clinging to the walls like living things. At the far end of the hall, an altar stood, bathed in a faint, otherworldly glow. The relic, a shimmering crystal, rested upon it, its presence both inviting and foreboding. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the room. I don't trust this, she muttered. Before Kale could respond, the ground trembled beneath them. The walls of the temple seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and the whispers that had haunted them since they entered grew louder, more urgent. The air was suffused with a dark power, and Kale felt it wrap around him like a vice, tightening with each passing moment. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, its silhouette monstrous and unnatural. It was cloaked in robes as black as the void, its face obscured by a mask of bone. Kale instinctively reached for his sword, but the figure raised a hand, and the air itself seemed to freeze. You seek the relic, the figure intoned, its voice like 1,000 voices speaking as one. But do you understand what you are truly seeking? This is not a weapon, nor a tool to be wielded. It is a shard of reality, a fragment of the very fabric of existence. To take it is to risk everything. Kale's grip on his sword tightened, but he held his ground. We know the stakes. We're not leaving without it. The figure's laugh echoed through the temple, hollow and devoid of humor. Then you will pay the price. With a wave of its hand, the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing a chasm filled with writhing shadows. From the darkness emerged twisted, nightmarish creatures, beasts of smoke and shadow that howled as they lunged toward the group. The battle erupted in an instant, and Kale and his allies fought with everything they had. Steel clashed against shadow, magic crackled in the air, and the screams of the creatures filled the temple. Kale was locked in a brutal fight with the masked figure, their swords clashing in a flurry of strikes. The figure moved with unnatural speed, its strikes landing like blows of thunder, each one forcing Kale back. He gritted his teeth, refusing to let the figure break his resolve. "Give up the relic," the figure hissed. "You cannot control it. You cannot control what it represents." Kale's heart raced as he parried another strike, the weight of the figure's words pressing down on him, but he refused to relent. The fate of the world rested on their success, and he would not let it slip through his fingers. With a final, desperate strike, Kale drove his sword through the figure's chest, its form dissolving into a cloud of smoke. The temple fell silent, the creatures vanishing into the shadows. Kale stood over the altar, the crystal glowing softly before him. He knew that this was only the beginning. The Silent Order would not be so easily deterred, and the true battle was still to come. But for now, the relic was his. The storm was far from over, and Kale could feel its fury gathering on the horizon. Chapter 17. The Shattered Dawn. Kale stood before the altar, the crystal in his hand, its power pulsing with a strange, mesmerizing rhythm. The weight of it was more than physical. It was as if the relic had a life of its own, its very presence pressing against Kale's mind, offering glimpses of things best left unseen. The shadows in the corners of the temple seemed to stir with malevolent anticipation, as if the room itself was watching him, waiting for his next move. "Kale," Lyra's voice cut through the tension, her tone sharp. "We've got to go. This place is a tomb waiting to collapse." He nodded, unwilling to waste another moment in the temple's suffocating atmosphere. Thalen had already begun to weave a protective ward around them, his voice low as he muttered incantations. Nissa, ever vigilant, kept her eyes darting around the room, searching for any sign of more ambushes. With the crystal now secured, they made their way out of the temple, the air outside feeling almost too fresh in comparison to the stifling darkness they had left behind. The moon hung low in the sky, its pale light casting long, ghostly shadows over the barren plains. The journey back to the Enclave would not be easy, but Kale knew they had little time to waste. The Silent Order would have sensed the disturbance by now, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim the relic. As they traversed the desolate terrain, Kale's mind churned with questions, doubts gnawing at the edges of his resolve. The relic was undeniably powerful, but the figure's words echoed in his mind. You cannot control what it represents. He could feel it now, its influence growing stronger, clawing at the edges of his thoughts. What was it? What force had they truly awakened by taking it? Lyra's voice broke through his musings. "Kale, something's wrong. Do you feel that?" Kale's senses flared. The wind had picked up, carrying with it an ominous chill that bit through his cloak. The ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet, and distant rumblings echoed through the mountains. It was a low, unsettling sound, like the growl of a predator sensing its prey. "We need to move," Kale ordered, his voice tight. "Now." But it was already too late. From the shadows of the mountains, a host of figures emerged, cloaked in darkness, their forms indistinct, as though they were made of the very night itself. The Silent Order had found them, and they had come in force. Kale's heart sank, but his resolve hardened. They had known this moment would come. It was simply a matter of when. The figures advanced, their movements eerily synchronized, and in the midst of them, Kale saw a familiar face, one that sent a cold shiver down his spine. The masked assassin from the night of the Enclave's attack. "You have the relic," the assassin's voice rang out, hollow and emotionless. "And for that, you will pay the price." The air around them grew thick with malevolent energy, the sky above darkening as if in response to the growing threat. The assassin raised a hand, and the shadows around them stirred, coalescing into monstrous forms, beasts of pure darkness, their eyes glowing with an unnatural fire. They were creatures of nightmare, born from the very darkness that the silent order wielded. "We won't give it up," Kale said, his voice firm, though his heart beat faster in his chest. Not without a fight. With a single motion, the battle erupted. Kale's sword gleamed in the moonlight as he leapt into the fray, his strikes swift and precise. Lyra, ever at his side, cut through the beasts with an agility that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Thalen's magic crackled in the air, creating barriers and wards to protect the group, while Nissa moved like a shadow, her arrows finding their marks with deadly accuracy. But even with their combined strength, the creatures kept coming. It was as though they were endless, feeding off the darkness that the silent order had summoned. The ground beneath them buckled and cracked, sending waves of energy through the air, making it harder for Kale to focus. And all the while, the assassin stood back, watching, waiting. His eyes locked on Kale as though he were nothing more than prey to be captured. Kale knew they couldn't hold out much longer. The power of the relic was waning, its strange energy beginning to pulse erratically. Something was wrong. Its influence was growing unstable, and Kale felt as though the very fabric of reality was beginning to tear around him. Then, in a blinding flash of light, everything changed. The crystal in Kale's hand flared with an intense glow, casting away the shadows and sending the beasts reeling back. Kale felt the power surge through him, a rush of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. His senses heightened, the world around him becoming clearer, sharper. It was as though time itself had slowed, and for a brief moment, he could see the strings of fate that bound the world together. But the crystal's power came at a cost. As the light from the relic subsided, Kale collapsed to his knees, drained of energy. The shadows that had once pressed in around them began to recede, but the toll of the battle had been heavy. The assassin stepped forward, his expression unreadable beneath his mask. "You do not understand the power you hold," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "This relic is not just a tool of destruction. It is a key to a greater power, one that the Silent Order has sought for centuries. You cannot control it. You cannot hope to contain it." Kale raised his head, his vision blurry but focused on the assassin. "Then I will learn to control it. I will not let you have it." The assassin's lips twisted into a cruel smile, but before he could respond, a deafening roar echoed from the distance. The ground shook once more, but this time, it was not the beasts that approached. It was something much worse, something far older. The sky above them split open, and a massive, dark figure descended from the heavens. Its form was impossible to comprehend. An ancient, cosmic being, vast and formless, made of swirling shadows and crackling energy. Its presence alone seemed to warp reality itself. And with its arrival, the true battle for the fate of the world had begun. Chapter 18. The Arrival of Night. The sky above cracked open with a deafening sound, a cosmic rift that seemed to split the very fabric of reality itself. Kale's breath caught in his throat as the massive figure descended, an ancient, otherworldly entity unlike anything he had ever imagined. It was vast, its form a swirling mass of darkness, crackling with unstable energy. Its presence distorted the very air, warping the horizon, and the land beneath their feet trembled in fear. The beast loomed above them, its shifting shape defying comprehension. It was as though the very essence of the cosmos had been torn asunder, and this being, this thing, was the jagged remnant of that destruction. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were nothing more than two burning orbs of pale, pulsing light. They flickered with an intelligence older than time itself, an intelligence that seemed to see into the very soul of Kale. The assassin who had led them to this moment, standing in the shadow of the great entity, bowed his head, his expression unreadable. "You do not understand," he said, his voice distant, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. "This being, it is the true master of the relic you hold. You have awoken it, and now the price must be paid." Kale's mind reeled. The relic, the darkness, the beast descending from the sky. He had sensed its presence growing stronger, but he hadn't expected this. What was this entity? This is what the Silent Order has been searching for? Kale whispered, his voice barely a breath. He could feel the weight of the question pressing on him, but the answer seemed too vast, too impossible to fully comprehend. The assassin nodded, his voice dark. The entity you see before you is the true force behind the Silent Order's mission. It is not of this world, nor of any world that exists within the boundaries of time. It is an ancient being, a cosmic god, sealed away by the three kings long ago. The relic you carry. It is the key to its freedom. Kale's grip on the crystal tightened, but the relic felt cold in his hands now, its energy no longer pulsing with the same intensity. It seemed to have gone dormant, its power drained, as if the very fabric of the world was resisting the call of the beast that had been awakened. He could feel the weight of the assassin's words sinking in. The relic was not just a weapon, it was a harbinger, a vessel for this ancient force. And now, with the entity free, there was no telling what would come next. The entity's gaze shifted toward Kale, its eyes narrowing as though it recognized the relic in his hands. The air around them grew heavy, and Kale could feel his pulse racing in his chest, the fear of the unknown gnawing at him. The beast's presence was suffocating, like a weight pressing against his very soul, threatening to crush him under its cosmic power. A booming voice, like 1,000 thunderclaps, filled the air. "You are the one who has awakened me," the entity intoned, its voice reverberating through Kale's bones. "You carry the key, the power to shape reality itself. But it is not enough. You are not enough. The Silent Order will see that the path is completed, and I will rise." Kale stumbled back, his legs unsteady. The ground beneath him shifted, the very landscape warping as though the world itself was being remade by the entity's will. His mind screamed for him to act, to fight, but the weight of the entity's presence was suffocating, oppressive. The assassin stepped forward, his cloak swirling in the unnatural wind that now whipped around them. He raised his hand toward the entity, a dark ritual unfolding. The ground trembled again, the air crackling with energy as the assassin began to chant. His words incomprehensible, ancient syllables that seemed to resonate with the very heartbeat of the universe. Kale felt a surge of desperation. The Silent Order had always been one step ahead, and now, it seemed, they had already succeeded in summoning this unimaginable force. He had to act, had to stop them before it was too late. "Thalen!" Kale shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Lyra! Nissa! We need to destroy the relic now." Thalen, still regaining his strength from the previous battle, nodded and began weaving a counterspell. Lyra and Nissa readied their weapons, eyes locked on the assassin, preparing for the worst. But Kale knew, deep down, that they were racing against a power that transcended everything they had fought before. The assassin's chanting reached a crescendo, and the ground beneath their feet shattered. The temple they had just escaped from now seemed to disintegrate, its stone foundations crumbling as the entity's influence spread outward. The sky above turned an unnatural black, its swirling chaos a reflection of the entity's awakening. In that moment, Kale realized something. The Silent Order had been preparing for this, sacrificing countless lives, manipulating the world's fate for centuries to bring about this very moment. This being, this ancient god, was not just a weapon. It was the fulfillment of their dark ambitions, a power so vast that even the three kings could not destroy it. It was beyond their control. And now, Kale thought with grim realization, I must stop it. With every ounce of strength, Kale hurled the relic toward the beast. The air itself seemed to resist, but the moment the crystal left his hand, there was a blinding flash of light, a shockwave of energy that sent Kale sprawling to the ground. The entity howled in fury, its form writhing and distorting as the relic collided with it. The ground shattered beneath Kale's feet, and the world seemed to tilt, spinning into chaos. He could hear the cries of his allies, but the noise was drowned by the deafening roar of the awakening god. "Stop!" Kale cried out, but his voice was drowned by the winds of destruction. He knew it was too late. The relic had unleashed something far beyond his understanding. The world was unraveling. The entity was free, and Kale could feel the beginning of the end. Chapter 19. The Fractured World. Kale's mind raced, his heart pounding as the entity roared in fury. The world around him warped, reality itself beginning to tear apart at the seams. The relic had struck the ancient god, but it only seemed to fuel its rage, amplifying the catastrophic power that now surged through the air. Kale, Lyra shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. We need to act now. The relic's energy is destabilizing. The sky had darkened completely, an abyss overhead that seemed to reflect the entity's awakening. The ground beneath their feet cracked and shifted, the land tearing apart as the force of the gods will bled into the world. The battle was no longer just against the Silent Order. It was against reality itself. Kale scrambled to his feet, his body weak from the backlash of the relic's release. His thoughts were a blur, a tangled web of fear, uncertainty, and determination. He had to stop this, had to undo what he had unknowingly unleashed. But the path forward was unclear. The assassin, standing amidst the storm, smiled with a dark satisfaction. You have played your part, he said, his voice carrying through the swirling chaos. But now, the true work begins. The Silent Order's victory is assured. Kale's gaze locked on the assassin. The threat of the Silent Order was still very real, but the awakening god was now their primary concern. The world was collapsing, and the relic had been the key to its unraveling. With a surge of adrenaline, Kale charged toward the assassin. You're wrong, he spat. I haven't given up. Not yet. Lyra, Thalen, and Nissa joined him, pushing forward through the chaos, fighting their way past monstrous shadows that seemed to spawn from the rift above. The earth shook beneath them, but they pressed on, their only focus the battle that had now become their reality. The entity loomed overhead, its presence suffocating, but as Kale neared the assassin, he saw something he hadn't expected, an opening, a fragile crack in the cosmic power that had been unleashed. The relic had struck the beast, but now, it seemed to be fading, its power waning. Kale hurled himself forward, his sword gleaming in the dim light, and struck at the assassin. The blow didn't land. Instead, the assassin raised his hand, sending a wave of dark energy crashing toward them. Kale barely managed to deflect it, but the force sent him sprawling to the ground. The battle was far from over. Thalen's magic flared, creating a barrier to shield them from another onslaught. We need to get to the heart of this, he shouted, sweat streaming down his face. We need to sever the connection between the relic and the entity. Kale nodded, his mind clearing despite the overwhelming pressure around him. The god's energy was fading, but it was still far too strong for them to challenge directly. Their only hope was to destroy the connection the relic had created. Stay close, Kale ordered, his voice firm despite the uncertainty gnawing at him. We finish this now. With determination burning in his chest, Kale and his allies pushed forward, reaching the epicenter of the storm. The ground trembled, but they held their ground, fighting through the tide of darkness that threatened to engulf them. As Kale raised his sword one final time, the sky above split open, and a blinding light erupted from the relic's core. The world shuddered violently, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. In that fleeting instant, Kale knew it was over. The storm broke, the rift closed, and the silence that followed was deafening. The entity was gone. The world was saved, at least for now. But Kale knew the truth. The Silent Order was still out there, and their thirst for power had only begun. And as the light faded from the relic in his hands, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far darker. The world had been fractured, and it would never be the same again. Chapter 20. The Quiet Aftermath. The world was eerily still. The land, which moments ago had been writhing in chaos, now lay silent under a sky free of the rift's cosmic disturbance. The ground still trembled, but the worst of the storm had passed. Kale's breath was heavy, his body battered, but the weight of their victory hung in the air like an unspoken question. Lyra, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion, stood at Kale's side, scanning the horizon. Is it over? She asked quietly, her voice tinged with disbelief. Kale didn't have an answer. The entity was gone, but the world had been irrevocably changed. The relic had drained them all, and the shadows of the silent order still loomed, waiting for their moment. Thalen collapsed beside Kale, his face pale, sweat dripping from his brow. "It's over for now," he murmured, but his tone was filled with uncertainty. "We've stopped the worst of it, but we've only delayed the inevitable." Nissa, ever watchful, didn't speak, but her eyes flicked toward the horizon, where the last traces of the rift had faded into the night. She was the first to break the silence. "What now? What happens next?" Kale's gaze drifted to the relic in his hand. It had gone cold, its light gone out, the pulse of energy now only a faint echo. The power that had once felt like a tidal wave now seemed like a fading whisper, but it was still there, an ever-present reminder of the forces at play. Had it really ended? "No one's ever truly gone," Kale finally said, his voice distant. "The silent order, they won't rest. They'll regroup and they'll try again." Lyra gave him a grim nod. "Then we're not done. Not by a long shot." They had stopped the awakening of the entity, but Kale knew they were far from finished. The silent order had seen the true power of the relic and the entity it could awaken. They would want it back, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim it. The only question was how long they would have before the next wave came crashing down. Kale exhaled sharply, looking to his companions. "We can't stay here. This place is a dead end. We need to move." The group made their way from the shattered battlefield, their steps slow and measured, each of them carrying the weight of their losses. Kale couldn't help but glance back at the land they just fought to save. The destruction was obvious. The once thriving landscapes were now marred by cracks and scarred earth, signs of the cataclysmic battle they just endured. And yet, there was a strange peace in the air, as if the world itself was taking a collective breath. "We head for the Wardens," Kale continued. "They're the closest thing to allies we have left. We need to regroup, figure out what's next." Lyra's hand rested on her blade as she walked beside him. "You think they'll trust us after everything that's happened?" "Trust doesn't matter anymore," Kale replied, his voice low. "What matters is whether we're ready for what's to come." The road ahead was uncertain, but Kale knew one thing for sure. They had faced the unimaginable and survived. But in surviving, they had become part of a much larger story, a story that had only just begun. As the group trudged forward, Kale felt the weight of the crystal in his hand once more. It was no longer the powerful artifact it once was. Its energy had been spent, its purpose fulfilled. But Kale knew that somewhere, in the vast reaches of the world, others would be hunting for it, for what it had represented. The silent order would return, but he would be ready. He had to be. A shadow shifted in the distance, a reminder that darkness still lingered. It was far off, but it was there, like the quiet before the storm. Kale paused for a moment, staring into the distance. Then, with a steady breath, he turned and continued onward. The quiet aftermath would not last long.